I'm President and CEO of Idaho Business for Education. And on behalf of IBE, I'd like to welcome you to the 6th Annual Legislative Academy. I think we had a great crowd this morning. It's so nice to see so many fresh faces from the weekend, legislators, education partners of IBE, and IBE members, so many from all across the state. So we have a very exciting program for you this morning. Very exciting speaker. I'd like to introduce our chair, Bob Locken, who probably doesn't need much of an introduction right now. So if Bob will come up, we'll get started. And thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Rob. Again, personally, I'd like to thank everybody for coming this morning and welcome you. We've done this now for 6 years, and so it's great to see people back again. I do have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. As you know, IBE is deeply focused on the 60% goal. Sometimes that gets confused what exactly that number means, but it has to do with how the workforce needs of our businesses are changing as the economy changes. And I can think of a few people who will be better to talk and share some interesting insights on how the workforce is transforming than our speaker today. So let me formally introduce Dr. Gregory Washington is the Dean of the School of Engineering at the University of California, Irvine. Before that, he was the interim dean at the College of Engineering for Ohio State University, which is one of the largest and highest ranked engineering schools in the country. His research has been focused on the design and control of smart material systems. He has consulted and done research for both public and private organizations ranging from NASA, the U.S. Air Force, to General Motors, to the National Science Foundation. Dr. Washington holds a doctorate from North Carolina State University in mechanical engineering, and he does great presentations. So, welcome, Dr. Washington.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to address you today and to talk to you a little bit about the case for STEM, why science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is truly important, and how it's affecting not just the everyday lives of people in the country, but how it's affecting folk right here in the state of Idaho. Can you all hear me fine? In the back, am I good back there? Yes. Well, it's not on? Oh. Well, it's going to get worse. The mic's not on. Okay, how's that? It's about the same, isn't it? I think it's going to change here in a second. In any event, look, I've gotten an opportunity to take a look at 3 different task force reports emanating from the state, and I actually want to commend your leadership. You all are moving forward ahead on this issue and taking it much more seriously than what I've seen in some other states. And so that is to be commended. Your leadership is to be commended, and that's all the way up at the highest levels. And that being said, it doesn't mean that there are not any problems. It doesn't mean that there are not any challenges. I'll highlight some of them today. But there is at least a considerable number of individuals who are focusing in on some of the key problems. And that's really, really important. Let me start off by highlighting where we are and what we're dealing with today. So I always, 70%, you see that number, and the first time I saw that number was when I was doing work for the Air Force Office of Scientific Research, and one of the, it's not working either. But you all can hear me, right? Yeah. Try again. So, first time I heard this, one of the members of the Joint Chiefs from the Air Force I was doing a project with them, and no, I hear it now. And he flashed this number of 70%, and he was talking to a group of us, and we were like, okay, well, what does that mean? And 70% of 18 to 24-year-olds right now in this country are not eligible for the military. They just can't get in. And he said, well, why in the world would that be the case? There are a whole host of reasons. One of which is they can't pass the basic military entrance exam. Back when I took it, and I spent time in the Army, it was called the ASVAB. It has since changed now. It's a much more high-tech military today than it was 15, 20, 30 years ago. Students are expected to know more as it relates to technology. This is one of the main reasons why they just can't pass the test. But it gets worse. Then that or a high school diploma. Now again, I kind of harken back, but if you wasn't going to college, back in my day, the military was kind of that next option for you, right? You were going to go to the military. Not necessarily the case today. Obesity, drugs, incarceration. So 70%, right? That 70% clearly is not going to college. Okay. It's increasing at 1% a year. Can't get in the military. You can't get in the military. What else can you do?
Get a job.
Is that 70% employment? Are they headed to public assistance? That's a challenge. And to be quite honest, is one of the quintessential challenges you're facing today. I looked at your data, and the data here shows that the job growth, it's one of the great things you have going on here in this state, the job growth in this state is outperforming the number of eligible individuals to take those jobs. That is increasing as well. But I'm going to come back to that. We also deal with what we call global grant challenges, and I highlight them as level 1 and level 2 challenges, and these affect everybody. Look, these level 1 challenges, these are issues that can eliminate our way of life, and let me put it in context. A level 1 challenge is an issue, anybody here been to the state of California? So we have this huge lake, Lake Tahoe. Anybody here been to Lake Tahoe? It's a great vacation spot. If you hearken back to the days of Noah, okay, and there was a concept called a biblical flood, right? And if we go back to the days of Noah, it said that it rained for how long? 40 days and 40 nights, right? And there is a scientific term called a biblical flood. It's synonymous with more than an inch of rain per hour over at least a 24-hour period, okay? They occur about every 500 years in the written record. We've had 8 in this country, in the last 10 years. 8 biblical floods. The last being Hurricane Harvey. How in the world does that relate to Lake Tahoe? About half the volume of water. About half the volume of water in Lake Tahoe is what descended on Houston during Hurricane Harvey. If you've been to Lake Tahoe and seen how massive that lake is, that starts to put it in context of what a level 1 challenge can be. And then you have what's called level 2 challenges. These are entities like our infrastructure, education, urbanization. Right now in Idaho, about 1 out of every 10 bridges and overpasses are structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. So think about that on your way home. Just count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Can this be the one? Right? And so We know that in this state, it's about $376 per person in automobile repairs just to deal with the road, the problems that emanate from the road infrastructure alone. Okay? And this state is actually good compared to some others, right? Every other year, the American Society of Civil Engineers does a report card. There's a report card for the country, and does a report card for each state. You want to guess what the grade, the 2017 grade was for the U.S.? It was a D+. It was a D+. Now, a D+ will not get you out of the engineering school at Boise State. I actually know that. And the point there is that the infrastructure issue is a problem. It's a level 2 problem, but it is indeed a problem. It's about $3.3 trillion to fix. And I know they're talking about doing something about it in Washington. We actually need to. Infrastructure issues are actually real. We also have unprecedented global competitors. So this was Singapore in 1965. This is Singapore today. This was Shanghai in 1987. That's Shanghai today. Now the interesting thing about these pictures is they were taken from the same exact vantage point, from the same spot. If you look there in Shanghai, you can see that the buildings are actually very, very similar between 2017 and 2007. The buildings on the side closest to us, right? That city there in the distance is a suburb of Shanghai called Pudong, and it looks like, you know, New York City and George Jetson got together and had a baby, right? And look, and here's the question. Do we have a single U.S. city that looks like that? If I were to ask you right now, what sport, what Olympic sport is the U.S. most dominant in, what would you tell me? Basketball. Basketball, right? And that happened in 1986 when we allowed our NBA players to actually play against the world, right? We put them on our Olympic team, and that team was affectionately called the what? Dream Team. The average margin of victory for the Dream Team and the other teams across the world was 36 points. That was the average margin of victory. 36 points. We beat, and we beat the teams so badly, it was amazing at the end. The other teams from the other countries would run up to our guys after they beat them and ask them to sign the basketballs. Right? But we won this past Olympics. Want to guess what the average margin of victory was there? 11 points. And I saw those games, and there were a few that were in doubt. And a couple of Olympics between 1986 and this past Olympics, we actually did not win. We actually lost. What is the point? The rest of the world catches up. And if it can catch up in basketball, were we actually really trying? In science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they can catch up and surpass too. And we're actually seeing that happening all over the world. And then finally, we're dealing with unprecedented change. And unprecedented change, we like to categorize, you know, as an engineer, we always put a number on something. Years of 50 million users is what we utilize to give you an idea of how fast things are changing. You know, oftentimes, if you're dealing with the change, you don't see the speed in which it's happening, right? So, for years of 50 million users, it took radio 38 years, television 13, cell phone 7, it took the internet 4 years to get to 50 million users. It took Facebook 2 years to get to 50 million users. How many of you all have Facebook accounts? It's all right. You say it. So the students now are getting off Facebook. Many of our youth are getting off Facebook because you're getting on it, right? 35 to 50 are the fastest growing group in Facebook. So people are getting off Facebook. Facebook is causing a lot of challenges too. Marriages, elections, all kinds of things. So people are getting off Facebook and getting on other things. But 2 years. What do you notice about that trend? 38, 13, 7, 4, 2. The change is happening faster. And the rate of change is happening faster. Took Pokemon Go 3 weeks. I'm afraid to ask. Anybody here got a Pokemon Go account? You're not part of that 50 million. But that's how fast the change is actually happening. And because change is happening fast, and then the rate of change is happening even faster, that means that outcomes that you would have expected to take 5, 6, 7, 9, 10 years are happening in 1 or 2 years now. Okay? And I'm going to give you some examples of that here in a second. For me, what does that mean as an engineering dean? It means that more than half of the top 10 in-demand jobs in 2017 didn't exist in 2006. How many have a smartphone? So, most, okay, actually I asked the wrong question. How many have a dumb phone? Anybody here have a dumb phone? You'll know it kind of flips up, doesn't have a keyboard. Actually, they're becoming back in style now because of hacking and some of the other things. But the progenitor of the modern smartphone is the iPhone. It celebrated its 10th anniversary this year. So in 2006, there was no iPhone. It just wasn't. There was no smartphone in 2006. You weren't Googling in 2006 either. Google had become a company in 2004. So very few people were using Google in 2006. In 2006, Wi-Fi was a misspelled word. Many of us at that point in time was using dial-up. You remember dial-up? Anybody here remember dial-up? And you hated if somebody sent you a picture, because that thing was Technology is also a real competitor to us, right? And so not only is technology bringing the change, but it's actually bringing challenges. And this is where the rubber starts to meet the road for most states, because what we know is that the computerization, we know entities like artificial intelligence and the like are actually changing the workforce. So this recent study was done by a group out of Cambridge looking at the U.S. economy. And it says about 47% of the current economy as it exists today is at risk of change, meaning 47% of the jobs in our economy right now in 5 years just will not be here. Those jobs are going to go and they're going to come, other jobs are going to come in. But definitely, if your job is listed in these categories here, look at the probability of some of these that the jobs will go away. They looked at every single job classification in the whole country for this study. This is real. When I was given the information to prepare for this talk, I read about what happened with Simplot, looking at the outcomes there, how they laid off 800 people, closing 3 plants, opened up another plant, became more than twice as productive with 250 people. And many of the 800 people who lost their jobs couldn't come back to work for the new plant where they had 250 new jobs because the new plant was a high-tech plant. They just didn't have the prerequisite skills necessary for those jobs. And so you'll start to see stuff like this guy here. My little humanoid friend up top, and he's dancing and moving around, But the reality is that this little toy robot can do all of this now. You don't think with artificial intelligence that there aren't, I can't dance like that. You don't think with artificial intelligence now bringing intelligence into the picture, that this little guy here won't be doing a lot of other things? Okay, let me put it into a higher level context for you. Listen to this.
Okay, Rita, what's my workout plan for today?
We're going for 20 miles, climbing 1,800 feet. This is too easy for you. Let's push a little harder.
How's my power?
Your power is 321.
Stop workout. Okay, Rita, what's today's run?
7 miles and climbing 900 feet. Nice job balancing your effort. Keep it up.
How's my pace?
It's 7 minutes, 32 seconds per mile, just right.
Stop workout.
Great job making it to the finish.
Thanks, coach.
You're welcome.
This is not science fiction. It's $4.49 at a store near you. You can buy those glasses right now. I actually spoke with Bruce Horn. He's the guy who led this project. It's a joint project between Oakley, who makes these glasses, and Intel, who made the chip that actually in the base of those glasses is a small computer chip. And so I'm sitting there talking with him, and he's a typical classic computer engineer, right? We're just sitting, we're talking, and I said, does it really work like this video? And he said, oh, most definitely. He said, I've never run a day in my life. And I decided that I was going to wear these glasses for, they had a 5K that Intel was sponsoring. He said, I'm going to wear these glasses, and over the next 3 months, I'm going to train for this 5K. Never run before. So he puts on the glasses, he starts to work out, the computer starts to learn who he is and how to adjust his pace. He finished 12. He never run before. Why is it so quiet in here? The point is this. There will be profound change in our lives. There will be profound change in our lives. This is the first of what we call digital assistants. You're starting to see more and more of them. And artificial intelligence is actually going through phases. So the first wave of artificial intelligence was way back in the days. You remember your computer, you played chess against your computer or checkers. You remember that? That was all what we call pattern recognition. It was limited reasoning, right? And it really just involved chess, right? And the computer, you could tell it, I want to, you could change the level of complexity. If you were a very poor player, you could tell it that, and it would play you like you were, and it would kind of let you win, right? And then, and as the level of complexity increased, you would get to the point where you might as well have Kasparov sitting in front of you. You're just not going to win, okay? And so that was the first wave. The second wave of AI is what we're in now. And now we've been able to, because of a concept called big data, meaning that the computational storage and computational capacity has gotten to the point where we can now process large amounts of data, meaning we give computers lots of information. And with that information, they're able to recognize patterns in speech in context. Right? You heard that computer talking to the individual, and the computer was telling him, keep it up, you're right on pace, you're doing just about right. Really putting things in context. Even if he were going too slow, his pace wasn't right that day, the computer would tell him, you need to pick it up a little. Right? or you need to, you know, or you're going above pace, you need to slow down a little. Okay? That's the second wave. That's the wave we're in now. When the third wave comes, Katie barred the door. Right? The third wave is reasoning, learning, abstraction, perception, all of those entities together. Now you reach a concept that many call the singularity, where computers have human-like qualities. They're not human, but they'll have human-like qualities, and you'll be able to interact and engage with them very much like a human. That's coming. And so the point then is, well, what then happens to us? Right? And at some point I'm waiting. So we started, looking at, you see the job changes in the country, and people originally start to look at people from other countries. Okay, people from this country are taking my job, people from that country. And so you have this wave of nationalism that's going around the world. It's all related to jobs, folks. That's what's driving it. At some point in time, people realize that it's not the individuals from Mexico or from China. They're dealing with the same issues. That technology is changing the playing field for everyone. And that's when we actually start to then get serious on what the actual solutions are. And I have some. Okay? You hear this all the time. The number of Americans that are unemployed goes up to 13 million if you look at unemployed and underemployed. But what you don't hear is that there are a little more than 6.1 million jobs in the country right now. 6.1 million jobs in this country right now that are unfilled. Again, jobs are going away, but new jobs are coming into play. We know that the number of total jobs coming will be fewer than the jobs that are leaving us. That's what efficiencies do, right? But those jobs that are coming are much more high level and much more high paying than the jobs that are leaving. Even if you look at the Simplot issue, those jobs that came, those jobs are $25 to $30 an hour jobs. The jobs that they replaced were far less than that. So this is Idaho's challenge. Like I said, it took some time to take a good look at what's happening, and the projected job growth and workforce leaves about a 50,000 job gap here between now and 2024. And to be honest with you, from what I can tell, these numbers are conservative. I think we're going to have more jobs than what you think. I think we're going to have more people leaving the workforce than you think. Why? Because the economy is doing so well. The market is up. You want to retire? Now's the time to do it. And actually, interestingly enough, I meet people in California who are trying to retire and move here, which I think is interesting, but I won't get into that. Look, the issue here is that things are changing. They're changing dramatically, they're changing radically, and we have to collectively get in front of that change. So, I see the greatest opportunities and the greatest focus moving forward in the general area of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And what does that mean? Look, the opportunities are endless. In 5 years, you'll no longer need IDs, money, credit cards, scorecards, business cards, photos, mail or mailman, paper and hardback books, bills and notices. You know, actually, you'll always have bills. They'll just be electronic, but you'll always have paper, steering wheels. The technology, actually, 15 years ago, I worked with a group of individuals on what's called the DARPA Challenge, was to build an autonomous vehicle. It was actually more than 15 years ago. We actually built, in the 90s, we built autonomous vehicles. That technology was developed then. And it's now commonplace. Why Why do you think we don't have more driverless cars on the road? It's not because technology had been here. Like I said, technology's been here since the 90s. You know, most of your airplanes are pilotless. That's been since the 70s. Your airplanes have been pilotless. The pilot, yeah, there's a pilot in there. How often do you think the pilot flies a plane? Computer's been flying a plane for a long time. It's called autopilot. Are there any pilots in here? Okay. But the technology for driverless cars has been around for quite some time. Okay? And the reason we don't have it today, the reason we don't see it, it's not as prevalent, is the social economic issues, the legal issues associated with driverless vehicles. Same reason why you don't have drones delivering your mail, delivering your packages, right? Because the FAA hasn't figured out how drones can occupy the same airspace as everything else, so to deliver those packages. That's why you don't have it. You think about it this way. You're riding in your car, I pull up next to you in a driverless vehicle, and I'm sitting in the passenger seat. You're in the driver's seat of yours. You freak out. You drive out in the intersection and get in an accident. Guess what happens? Who do you sue? You sue me because I distracted you. That is at the crux of why you don't have it. It's all a liability issue, right? Driverless car has to make a decision. This is the big paradox that engineers are dealing with. So it's amazing. When I sat recently in a conference where we debated this issue. Driverless car coming down the street, another car pulls out in front of him. He can either hit that car, swerve, go on the sidewalk and hit a pedestrian. Somebody's going to get hit. Who gets hit? Does it pedestrian or you hit the car? Or what happens when you have two sets of pedestrians and the accident is inevitable? I'm either going to hit this pedestrian here, or I'm going to hit this one here. One's a young kid and one's an older adult. That's why you don't have it. Because the computer has to make that decision. And we ain't going to like it. Right? We make the bad decisions all the time. Okay? But when the computers start making them, trust me, it's going to be a real problem. The first time the computer decides to take this life and not that one, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real one. And that's why this is not just a STEM issue. All of the other fields are going to get changed too. If you're a lawyer, law is going to change. If you're a humanist, if you're a sociologist, sociology is going to change. Right? So our sociologist faculty, the biggest thing they're dealing with is all these issues related to cyberbullying. Right? And I'm talking with group of students that say, hey, why is this a problem? You know, when I grew up, we didn't have cyberbullies. We had real bullies. And the real bully hit you in the nose. And your nose bled. You felt it. That was real. Right? How can it be worse than that? You know what the student told me? And it was just an amazing answer that really made me think. He said, look, if that kid hits you in your nose will hurt, it'll bleed, but in 2 weeks it's over. The kind of things that people are saying about other people online stays forever. What's worse? Can you honestly tell me? I don't want to get hit in the nose, okay? But can you honestly tell me which one is worse? So, here's my point. This is not just about technology. We don't need just people to become scientists and engineers. We need this to be an integral part of our educational process. Whatever, to be a learned individual means that you have to have this understanding of technology along with whatever passions you have in life, no matter what those passions are. Even if you're an artist, you're not going to escape technology. So technology becomes an integral part of your art. This is CRISPR-Cas9 technology. It's in its very early stages now. A lot of it's being done at UC Irvine. But what CRISPR-Cas9 technology allows you to do is literally go in and change the individual genes of an entity. And right now, they're doing it with fruit flies and mosquitoes and the like. It's been used to eradicate. There are no mosquitoes in Irvine. Actually, I don't know if this was a good thing or not, but they've actually eradicated the mosquito population in Irvine. There are just no mosquitoes there. Mosquitoes only travel 10 to 20 miles in terms of flying. When we get mosquitoes at transport, they usually get on planes with people and then they get off. But as individuals, they travel very short distances. Okay? And so this technology has been used is to eliminate malaria and other diseases that are carried by mosquitoes and others. But what they found is that basically the technology can be used to change eye color. Or if you want a sprinter gene in your kid, you can have that. If you want your kid to be 6'5", you know, and have a 180 IQ, you can, at least theoretically right now, have that too. And while we won't have to deal with it with our kids, without question, they're going to be running around on the soccer field. There's going to be some 6'2", 7-year-old who's going to be running around. And you're going to be wondering where that kid comes from. It sounds like science fiction now, but if I sat, okay, let me put this in context. You remember this? Anybody tell me what this is? Pong. And I was great at Pong. I'm 8. So back when I was playing Pong, I had no idea what would come to this. This is FIFA 2015. This is FIFA. It is the highest grossing video game on the planet. All the kids play it. Okay? I'm really good at Pong. My kids argue over who has to have me on their team when we play FIFA. I had Dad last time. You got it this time. Okay? And there was no way when I was playing Pong that I could see that it would come to this. Here's my point. It's happening much faster now. You can't conceive of what's coming next. I can throw a lot of things at you. I can guarantee you that all of them won't be true. Some of the technologies that are coming forward that we're going to see are going to blow our minds. But you're literally going to change the way in which we operate. Some of them are going to be challenging. Right? Some of them won't. Okay? Like, I doubt we're going to have flying vehicles. You know, like George Jetson and the like. But I do think some of this stuff you will have. You definitely will have. First, it'll come to eradicate childhood illnesses and diseases, right? We'll be able to test the child early to see if they're going to have Down syndrome and the like, and then you just pull the gene out, and the kid develops without it. That's where it's going to start. Where is it going to end? I don't know. Okay? Now, the question is education changing fast enough? I know who I'm talking to. I know there are a lot of educators in the room, and I kind of feel like that cat right now. I'm behind podium for what I'm about to say, okay? And the question is, look, the deal is that we're not moving fast enough, right? We're definitely not moving at the pace of industry. You remember manufacturing was like this? It was all cold and dirty and hard and very, very dangerous, right? And that's how manufacturing used to be. Yeah. This is modern manufacturing. Okay? Interestingly enough, when I say modern manufacturing, so up top here, on the top right, you see individuals going through the design of an aircraft engine, and on the bottom, you see robots developing a car. Here's the interesting thing. This facility, this plant here that's doing this with the robots, totally assembling a vehicle, I think their total amount of human intervention is about 12%, the whole vehicle assembly. So 88% of the car is put together by robots. That plant is 20 years old. Our case paper. This is a study from a paper. And you're gonna just bear with me a little bit here. What the paper was actually looking at is a new type of handheld device. It was a wrist device. You put it on your wrist and it measured brain activity. Right? So they built these devices, you put them on your wrist, and it measured your brain activity. And they were testing the device. So they got a bunch of students, they gave them all these devices, and said, go out for 7 days. And the research paper was about testing the device. Right? So it said, go out for 7 days, wear this device, we're going to see how well our device works in measuring brain activity. Right? And all they had to do was say what times of the day they were doing what. Right? Since these were all students, they kind of knew what time of the day they were doing what. So here are your days of the week. And the spikes there are brain activity. Okay? And so you can see that there's times when they were sleeping. Look at the brain activity at sleep. Look at the brain activity when they were doing homework. Lots of brain activity. Look at class, all the way to the right in yellow. Class is like, that's the dead. Look at that. I showed this to my colleagues and they just, look, here's the thing. They wasn't testing for that. They were testing the device. It just, when I saw the study, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Why is class so long? Right? The point is we're not keeping pace with our students. Right? And we also know that not everyone is included. Look, this is the data of engineering bachelor degrees going back to 2005. I can take this back to 1995. It's a fairly constant plot. And what you see there is, when you look at it by ethnicity, we're not seeing significant numbers of Black and Latino students receiving engineering degrees. And that's the problem because those are the growing groups still in our society today. And if you think we won't be a third-rate power, you just will get into a position where we just won't have enough horses to win the race. Right? Same thing for women. I can go back 20 years. I can go back 30 years. This number has got to go up. Women are 50% of our society. 50, actually 51%. Who's counting? But only 20% of the engineers. The number has to change if we're going to be competitive in our future. Okay, and so how do we change things and how do we move forward? So there are 4 solutions here. Partner or perish, disrupt the paradigm, create new innovators, and embrace what's next. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly just in the essence of time. I want to make sure I have significant time for some questions. The partnerships is the big one. And partnerships, look, it is not on K-12 and higher education to solve this problem. We have to solve this problem together. We actually need industry. I'm sitting here, I'm an engineering dean. I have lots of engagement with industry. I don't know what our students need to know. I don't know what the students need to know when they come to your businesses to work. I don't know that. Somebody has to tell me. So companies have to engage us in a way in which we say, look, here are the skills that the students need when they get on our shop floor. You'd be surprised how little of that actually happens in the country today, right? And that's happening at every level. Industry actually needs to be involved at K-12, not just at higher ed, because we know that oftentimes the jobs that are going to be produced don't require a 4-year degree. They can require a 2-year degree. They can require in-depth training that leads to a certificate with no degree. This is one of the reasons why I really like the concept that has been championed in the state of having 60% of your, 18 to 24-year-olds that have some type of certification or degree. And you've expanded that to, not just focus on the degree part of that, but to look at the certification part of that as well, because that's also what's needed. I always say these name tags don't stick to polyester very well. So anyway, and right now what's popping up all over the country are these STEM learning ecosystems. You have one here in Colorado. You have one here. There's one in Colorado. There's one here in Idaho. They're starting to grow up. These are some of the other ones across the country. All around the country, there are these major public institutions. And those ecosystems that are cropping up in these communities aren't yet talking to the major academic institutions. And so we're putting a process in place now to try to ensure that more of that communication actually happens, because the two entities need each other. And then there's the corporate side of the house. Like I said, bringing companies in early. Companies should have K-12 partners, a significant number of them, and they should have university partners. And that process of back and forth engagement is critical. It has to happen. And I can't even say what the needs are for each community, because what I'm seeing is that the needs in each community are actually different, right? Well, you got to have the right people in the room talking. And more of that has to happen. And again, it's one of the areas where I see Idaho doing some really interesting things in terms of this Business and Education Council. This is the kind of thing that's necessary. It's not happening. Look, I'm in the largest state in the country. I manage all of the engineering deans in California, all of them. We have a reporting structure, and I'm the coordinator of that entity. We don't have this. We don't. We would like to, but getting everybody on the same page is non-trivial. We need to disrupt the educational paradigm, meaning what that means is that there will be more online. There will be a continuum of computers engaging in our educational process. That's going to happen. That should continue to happen. It should grow. We are pushing that. It is not a bad thing. Doesn't mean that the professors are going away, but it does mean that the job of the professor changes. Just like the jobs of the individuals in the manufacturing plant at Simplot changes, the jobs of teachers and professors will change. Right? And guess what happens to the ones who do not change? Well, the same thing that happened to the other workers, right? Yeah, the dinosaur. Exactly. And then we got to create new innovators. Look, we have millennials in the society today, along with Generation X and baby boomers, and I classify them in three categories. Our millennials, they're what we call digital natives. They've grown up with computers. They use my kids. They are comfortable, and before they learn how to spell, they could type PBS kids on there. They didn't know a few letters. The computer would complete the rest of the website, and they can go to their little websites. They've grown up like that, and they're totally comfortable with it. They'd much rather be on their phones or on their computers than talking to you. They're comfortable. They're digital natives. Many of us are what we call digital immigrants. Right? We use computers and this technology for our work. We didn't grow up with it, but we've adapted to it. And then you have the third group. And all of these exist on my campus today. I got faculty in every single category. The third group is what I call digital hostage. Okay, the digital hostage are individuals who, you still got to call them on the telephone. You got to stop by there. Don't send me an email. And it's interesting. Now the younger folks will say, don't send me an email, right? Because they respond to text and Instagram and other things. You want to contact me, use those. So you can't send them an email. And then the older ones, you can't send them an email either because they're never on email, right? And so we have to create new innovators. And what does that mean when we talk about new innovators? Kids are ideal for this, and you got to start really young. Look, kids are creative. They are motivated by challenges. They're not afraid of failure to resist. All the stuff we beat out of them by the time they're like 6 or 7 years old, right? We just push it out of them by that time. But we got to start really, really early. We are now developing technologies and tools for individuals at 3, 4, and 5 years old. And they're learning this stuff, they're engaging with those technologies, and we're amazed at the outcomes in terms of readiness when they get to kindergarten and first grade. It's an amazing thing. It's something that is needed here. Right now we know, and it can happen in your home, okay? Right now we know that about, 49, 50% of the individuals who are reaching kindergarten, first grade, are not ready to learn in this state. That has to change if you're going to be competitive in the future, right? Because you're putting stress on the academic process early. So how are they going to adopt the other technologies they need when they're teaching to the median of a class where 50% of the students who walk in that class aren't ready to learn? Right? So it's something that has to change. Youth are having a tremendous impact. I won't talk about all the great things that are happening, but what we see is that we put young kids, young boys and young girls, when we give them access to technology, they do great things with it, and that's happening today, but I can tell you it's always happened. What do all these companies have in common? Google, Sun, Apple, Microsoft, all of them, the founders were in their teens or 20s. The founders were in their teens or 20s when they founded all of these companies. So we have to start with it. That's the model. The greatest companies that we have, the ones that we hold in the highest esteem, were started by teenagers. So I'll end on this last couple of slides here. Look, I've given you a lot of stuff here, and these are the great achievements. We have really great competitors. But if I look over the last century, right, what were the great achievements? Electrification, the automobile, the spacecraft, the internet. All of those occurred in the West. Many of those occurred in the US. And it was at a time when China had 6 times the population that we do. Well, now it's about 4 times, isn't it? And you say, I don't know, but China was communist at that time, and you know, I don't know if we can really compete. Well, we can. Look at the 21st century innovations. Facebook, YouTube, Google. We're still innovating in this country, and we will continue to innovate. Right? Look at that. SpaceX, Broadcom, Amazon, Edwards. These are all technologies that have come out of this country. Right? And we're still rising to the occasion. So, I want to thank you for giving me the time to talk.
That was great. We have a few minutes for questions, and we have 2 microphones. Jason's got a microphone, and Skip's got a microphone for this side of the room. So if you got a question, just raise your hand, and they'll come around and grab it for you. Any questions? Oh, way over here, Skip.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to ask about your opinion with regard to adverse childhood experience and all the research that's come out of San Diego, but through the Centers for Disease Control. We realize that so many children in poverty or minimum wage homes in Idaho are not coming to school prepared to learn, in part because not only are they academically delayed, but they've had a major negative impact on their social and emotional maturity. And I'm wondering if you could address, because to me, recognizing this major factor is so important in terms of the educational reform that you're indicating is so very necessary. And after 40 years in education, I would agree that we need to shift things. But what about the roots of the problem of children who are, in a sense, distressed by their early childhood experiences?
Look, this is something that, look, I can speak to somewhat personally. And I will tell you that there are 2 approaches to this. And one is the nuclear family, right? And that's not always intact. And look, I had the same challenges growing up. Like, I grew up in a very poor household, and my mother was 14 years old when she got pregnant with me. And so I know what that's like. I got a 15-year-old now, and I'm like amazed. I'm like, there's no way I trust you with a kid. And so I understand this. I understand this intimately. And what I will tell you is our communities now really have to start the process of embracing. This cannot be solved by government or academia or any entity alone, but it can actually be solved by the community. My mother was a very young mother when I was growing up. But I probably had 10 mothers in my neighborhood, at least 10. And I knew if I did something down the street, I was probably going to, well, I can't even say this here. I was probably going to get 2 or 3 whoopings before I got home, and I was going to get another one from my mother when I got home, right? And it's because that community then embraced, the community embraced all of the kids in that community, and that's how you keep those communities intact. And that's the piece that, in my opinion, we've lost today. We've lost the sense of community, and we need to fight like hell to get it back. Because that's what's necessary, especially in poor communities. Okay? It was a coach or a teacher or somebody who at key times in my life spoke to me. Right? And it may not have seemed to them like those times were falling on fertile ground, but they were, right? I remember, the old scripture is important to me. You train a child up in the way they should go, right? And when they get old, they won't depart from it. I believe in that, and it's a testament to my own life. So that's one part. The second part is that we can't remove the social structures that government and education do offer. Those have to be intact as well. We need those in case the community fails. We're in danger of losing, I showed you the data, we're in danger of losing a whole generation if we really don't get on this and get on it very, very aggressively. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate your presentation. I'm a legislator here. I'm also an educator in the college system. I like your slide on disrupting the system, but I don't know, maybe it's a complex question here. In disrupting the system, I understand you're partnering with business and introducing technologies and innovations. However, education seems to be one of those fields where the innovation and advancement has been slow in coming. You kind of played it off that we've competed well against China because they were communist for a long time, but now they're not so communist, and maybe we feel more threatened by it. But in a lot of ways, we've had our education run and not advance, and we sure we'll get PowerPoint in the classroom, we'll get something like that. But if you look at 40, 50 years ago, kids still go to class 6 periods a day. They go in, they listen to a teacher, they're brain dead or whatever, for that time.
That's right.
But the innovation in education hasn't really come. We see these innovations. We see Shanghai and Singapore advance the way they have. We see the technologies and the cell phones advance the way they have because of choice and competition. Part of disrupting the paradigm, maybe we need to get out of this cycle of saying, oh, we're failing in this area, let's put more money to it, get good teachers, put more money to this, create a new program here. Our legislative priorities always seem to be, we need to do another program, an earlier program, a different program. Why not take the path of choice and competition and innovation and have, if we see the innovation and the choice happen with charter schools, we see it in private schools. For some reason, public education, we were using the overhead projector 30 years after bowling alleys got rid of it. And so, why can't we Why should that be part of your disruptive paradigm?
Well, it is. Now, I will tell you, well, so two things. Number one, there have been major challenges in our sojourn as a country. And if you go back from the conversion of the one schoolhouse in a community where kids of all grades went to that little schoolhouse, you look at the conversion of that, and then you look at the conversion going to what we call cooperative education. You look at the digital revolution and all of those entities. Education actually has made dramatic changes over its lifespan, okay? And you have to take a broader look to see those changes. That being said, the change isn't fast enough. And so I agree with you in that sense. Competition should come in, whether that competition comes from charter or other type schools. But if you're going to bring in that competition, there needs to be, the playing field needs to be somewhat level, right? You can bring in the competition, but then allow the public schools to compete as well, right? And remove some of the constraints. And we can talk offline about what some of those are. Remove some of the constraints that keep those schools from competing. Allow them to compete as well. They oftentimes, unlike private and charter schools, they don't have the luxury of choosing their students. Right? They get who they get, and with all of the baggage that comes with them, and they have to make the adjustment, right? And so I've walked into private schools. We got a big program in Crystal Ray schools in Philadelphia. So I've been consulting with them and worked with them for the last few years. And somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10% of their students were making it to college. In the inner city in Philadelphia, about 10%. It's just disheartening. And we put a private school right in the middle of that and only accepted kids from that community. It took us a couple of years, but we were able to put in place a curriculum now where 90% of those kids, and it's the same kids, are graduating. What you often don't have in the private and charter realm is you don't have mechanisms like that, right? You know, you can take kids from well-to-do, affluent, and more stable communities, and you can do really well and be innovative with them. I want to see you be innovative with these. It's a very different context altogether. So we can talk.
Dr. Washington, in order to embrace the realities that you presented to us today, what is the University of California higher education system doing culturally, strategically, with regard to curriculum and structure, and what are you asking of the K-12 system in California in way of change to meet these realities?
So this is good because I'm both part of the problem and part of the solution in this regard. And so I will tell you that I started where I sit in terms of changing the engineering discipline, and we've made tremendous strides in terms of how we educate students. You would think that engineering, because it sits at the vanguard of technology, doesn't need change, but we still educate by and large like we did 20, 30 years ago, and that was unacceptable to me. That we've modified those educational processes where our freshmen are now educated like our seniors are, and much more open, much more in teams, much more hands-on, experiential, and the like. And so we're pushing that now down in our communities, into the K-12 and into the high school realm. We started with an inner city charter school, so I have worked with them. And the reason we started there is because they didn't have the constraints that the public schools had, right? And so we started there with them, and then we've taken those techniques that we've been developing with them, and now we're moving them out into the public school realm. So our whole educational system has to be rethought re-implemented, and redone. And this is a tough thing to say. Look, not all the teachers who are here with us now are going to be here with us 5 or 10 years from now in this context. It's just, some people don't have the aptitude for it. Some of them, they just don't want to do it. But for the sake of the country, some things have to be done. Some changes have to happen. And so we're seeing that happening at every single level. And that change is actually, from what I've seen in California, it's actually been pretty good. Right? It's not across the board yet, but it's growing.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. One over here, and then Jamie.
So in the context of technology being a competitor and outpacing our workforce, I think about this a lot because I worry that the cost of personnel is high. Salary, benefits, sick days, vacation time, technology, a robot doesn't need those things.
That's
so
right.
Even if we rise to meet some of these challenges in our education course, is there some onus on the business community to invest in people over technology? I mean, I understand companies can be much more competitive, and I've already seen it. I was at an airport in New York, and an iPad took my order at a restaurant. I looked at a menu, it took my order, and I paid it. And the only people involved were the people making the food. And I think that choice was made in part because it's so much cheaper to buy an iPad than it is to invest in employees for years to come. And so is there something that needs to be done on the business side to ensure that people aren't continually, even if we can't meet those challenges or even if we do, are we going to be out of the job anyways because we're too expensive?
This is a really good point. So you bring up a good point. And here's the thing. So if the iPad is taking your order and doing all of that stuff that a person did at one point in time, then where do those people go, right? Well, there are a whole host of jobs and opportunities and technologies associated with the development of the technology that's in that iPad. And that still needs humans. Humans write the software, right? Yeah, some computers are trying to write software now, but that's not happening, right? The humans write and develop the software. The humans develop and build and make the hardware, right? And so that's where you start to see that shift, that important shift. And it's a bitter pill, but some jobs will go away. They're just not going to be here. And the silver lining to that is that new jobs and new classifications of jobs will come into light. Look, I didn't highlight it enough earlier, but think about it. If you go back to 2000, 2002, 2004, there was no Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi was a misspelled word. There were no apps, right? None of those things existed. Now, there are whole fields of endeavor associated with the way in which we communicate. There are all of these jobs associated with that. There are all of these jobs now associated with app development and apps and those things. Those things were not here just 8 years ago. So there are new opportunities on the horizon, right? And then we create new problems with these new technologies. We actually create problems for ourselves with this. And then those create more jobs for individuals to deal with those problems and outcomes. So what happens is the job changes. Let me put it to you in this context. I could be the greatest developer of courses and attending of courses for transportation on the planet. When the car came, I better have become a mechanic or I was probably going to be out of a job. And that's kind of, it's the same thing at a different level.
Thank you, Dr. Washington, for being here. And I guess you touched on something that's very concerning to me. As a retired teacher, I agree many teachers are not going to be entering the field, and we've seen it already. We have a tremendous shortage of educators here in Idaho. So could you just talk a little bit about how we're going to get those best and brightest in the classroom to educate our children?
Well, it first starts, you got to pay them better. Seriously. The pay for teachers it's too low for the expectations and for what we're putting on them in terms of what we want them to know. Remember, industry is competing for those same individuals as well nowadays, right? They want smart people. And if we're not paying those individuals enough, well, they just assume go get an industry job and make more money, right? And then you wind up with people who aren't as talented, or people who just have a tremendous passion. And that's what we're seeing now, right? We see people who are just incredibly passionate. This is what I wanted to do all my life, and by golly, I'm going to do it, even if it means I'm eating beanie weenies every night, right? And then you have the other side where, no, I really couldn't get these other jobs, but this one is available, so I'm going to get this. And if you change the pay scale, you actually then start to open those opportunities up. And you can start it really by focusing in those areas where they're the highest need first. But that has to extend throughout the whole educational construct. I think that's where you start, to be honest with you.
I think we should give Dr. Washington a good